Call the meeting to order on June 23rd at 7:15. First is the flag salute. So we've changed the agenda up a little bit today to accommodate some people who requested to speak. So the first thing we're going to do is our roll call.
Ms. Bolenbacher.
Here.
Mr. Chandler.
Here.
Ms. Compitello is absent. Mr. Lavasser.
Here.
Mr. Marks.
Here.
Mr. Oliverio.
Here.
Mr. Rodilla.
Here.
Mayor Perry.
Here.
Solicitor Corbel. Engineer Minsterman. Myself. We have a quorum.
All right, the minutes and bill list, minutes from June 9th and the bill list from June 23rd were on the OneDrive for all of council to review. And I'd like to make a motion to approve the June 23rd, 2022 consent agenda.
So moved.
All right. Philip?
Second.
Second is Justin.
Aye. Aye.
Is the cable franchise public hearing, and Mr. Sample is going to lead this portion.
Okay, if you bear with me, I have to read some prepared remarks that's part of the process for the cable franchise renewal. This hearing was advertised in the June 9th Post-Gazette in the local section. So good evening. This is a public hearing of the Borough of Crafton regarding the cable franchise renewal. This let's start again. This public hearing is held pursuant to Section 626 of the Federal Cable Act, which sets forth the process for franchise renewal. The borough's current franchise with Comcast is within the normal industry renewal window, and the borough is beginning that process of renewing the franchise agreement. It expires in September of 2024. And this is within the renewal window. The public hearing is part of the preliminary portion of the franchise renewal, in which the borough reviews the cable operator's past performance and identifies the borough's future cable-related community needs. As such, as part of this public hearing, we invite comments from any citizens who wish to speak regarding either of the aforementioned subjects. Franchise renewal is the best opportunity for municipalities to assert their rights with respect to their cable operator and to obtain important benefits in return for granting the cable operator the rights to use the public rights of ways. That's the key for the franchise. They could lay their cable in our rights of ways by the sidewalks. The benefits include state-of-the-art cable system now and in the future, strong customer service standards, free services, cable services to community facilities, better reporting requirements from the cable operators, maximize franchise fees, public and educational and governmental channels if desired. These are the PEG channels, legal protections of the rights of ways, and better mechanisms to enforce this franchise agreement. Citizens may address these items or any other cable-related items that are important to them. We will now open the hearing for citizens' comments. Thank you. And again, this doesn't have anything to do with the channel lineup or anything like this. This is the right of the cable company to put their line in the public right of way, which the borough controls. And in return for that, the cable company pays a franchise fee to the borough to use for items in its normal operating expenses. So we'll ask online if there's any comments. Okay, the record, there was no public comment, so we will close the hearing. Thank you.
Back to the old way. All right, next is the Crafton Boulevard streetscape presentation by Gateway Engineers. So we're going to have Gateway present the Crafton Boulevard. We heard a lot of feedback from the public about this project. So we want to have the engineers do presentation, then we will open it up for public comments. Now, if you do want to speak during the public comments section, I remind everybody, you'll raise your hand if you're on Zoom, and you'll sign in the sign-on sheets on the table over there.
Mr. President, as mayor, might I make an opening statement?
Absolutely.
So in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the mayor in a borough is primarily responsible for the public safety. And pursuant to that, we're here tonight to answer a lot of questions about concerns that have been fomented about the public safety in relation to the Crafton Boulevard streetscape. What I'd like to do is to just make a few comments along those lines. Specifically, what I have heard and what my esteemed colleague who is our fire chief, has been concerned about is the ability for access to the school. And we have had one email expressing questions about that. And what I have distributed is something that shows that the concern about getting around the bump outs on Vance Alley as a way to get into the back of the school may be a non-issue, because as you proceed down Vance Alley, there is a pain point that would probably make it pretty much impossible for the ladder truck to make the turn into Orchard Way. It's been pointed out to me by a number of experts that a straight shot from our fire department up Noble Avenue, wide turn left into Orchard Way will get them in the alley. There is also concern about getting to the front of the school during construction. And I would further point out that proceeding all the way up Noble and left on Noble onto Crafton Boulevard would put any type of emergency vehicle directly in front of the school and not be hampered by any of the construction that is underway. There was also some concern about the ladder truck being able to get into Bradford Court. And in full disclosure, for anyone who doesn't know, I live right there and have lived there for 28 years. What I have distributed a picture of is that curb, which is now a handicap ramp that is almost level with the pavement. There is a utility pole right on the corner that limits how much, how narrow they can go in, but they can certainly go over the curb. And when they were attempting the other night, that's what they did with the rescue in order to get into Bradford Court. I would like to also point out that there is concern about the size of the roadway and its safety. What we will hear again tonight and has been mentioned before is the roadway is not going to be any narrower. Those bump outs are the width of a car. I can tell you that even with the construction not finished, that these bump outs have served their purpose. One of our biggest areas for our police to be issuing citations, and I have watched them year after year, is the stop sign at Crafton Boulevard and Bradford. And with these bump outs, people are slowing down and they are not speeding through the stop sign any longer. So I just wanted to let everyone know that I take the public safety very seriously, and that in the years that I have been on council and have been part and parcel of this planning process, that safety, even when it wasn't my primary responsibility, has been taken into account. And I hope that everyone will listen carefully to what Gateway has prepared for us tonight. And I appreciate the opportunity for everyone to have all of their concerns aired and answered. Thank you.
Mayor, you had mentioned you had distributed some reports.
I did a couple of pictures.
Okay. Yeah, council does not have this. Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah, the batteries, I think, are dead. All right, so we're going to have Gateway Engineers do a presentation on the Crafton Boulevard separation project and streetscape so that the public will be aware of everything that was going on. This presentation did occur prior into last year, but we're going to go through it in detail. So. Rick?
A couple of items. We brought copies of the presentation. Hold.
That's working.
All right, so what I was saying is we have a copy of the entire presentation in hard copy. If folks want that, they can grab it now, or you can get it after the presentation if you want to follow along, or just take it home to have it to look closer. So that said, I want to talk about the streetscape project on Crafton Boulevard. I wanted to start off with introducing the design team from Gateway so you can see what level of experience that was brought to the project. So first is Mike Haberman. Mike is a senior professional traffic engineer working in the Pittsburgh area for the past 22 years doing traffic analysis, signal and intersection design, roadway design, traffic calming, and construction oversight. Alberto Jarquin is the actual project manager for the project. Alberto is a senior professional civil engineer practicing in the Pittsburgh area since 2009 and prior work on civil projects in Massachusetts. He has 19 years of civil experience in land development design, preparation of site plans, site approval, utility design, zoning analysis, and construction oversight for for commercial, institutional, and residential projects. Mike McCormick is also with us. He is a landscape designer, bachelor's degree from Purdue in landscape architecture with 8 years experience working in New England and the Pittsburgh areas. He works on numerous public and private projects, including streetscapes, traffic calming, urban development, and community master planning. And myself, I'm Rick Minsterman. I am a municipal engineer and have been practicing civil engineering for over 30 years in Pittsburgh. I've represented numerous municipalities as their municipal engineer, working in a myriad of municipal civil infrastructure projects over my career. So that said, I also wanted to point out some other locations of streetscapes with similar bump out features where traffic calming had been implemented to show this is a widely accepted practice, even in the Pittsburgh area, even though sometimes we're a little behind on some things, but it is here. We didn't design all these projects, just pointing them out. So at Borough, their downtown streetscape is completely a streetscape design with bump outs and all of the very similar features that we have here. It's a very small town. This University of Pittsburgh did a project just like this on Forbes Avenue. City of Pittsburgh has 2 projects, East Carson Street and Smallman Street, massively busy streets, tons of buses, people, all type of equipment and vehicles that you can imagine. And then Potomac Avenue, it's small town again, and Dormont
where similar bump out and traffic calming features are present. So one last thing before we get into the details of the project, I wanted to identify some of the objectives of the streetscape project. What did we talk about back in the summer of 2020? What were the objectives of this streetscape, which, by the way, is similar to many streetscapes? I rattled off a list there. So I remember one specifically: improve the mobility of pedestrians. That is important in the town of Crafton. It is a highly walkable community. Increase the pedestrian and driver safety. That was a key, is safety for both the pedestrians and the drivers. Slow and calm the traffic. Integrate the stormwater control aspect of the Crafton Boulevard project. That's part of it. Provide an aesthetic appeal to this corridor. Utilize green space to soften the concrete and asphalt environment and provide stormwater quality improvements. So remember, the stormwater that we're discharging from this area is discharged directly to the stream. So the greenscape items that are integrated here serve to filter sediment, cool water, and other water quality improvements. So, okay, that's a good intro. I wanted to talk now about, and we'll put this up on the screen, the planning and design chronology. So some of the things that we've heard is that maybe some folks didn't know about this project, or, was council involved, planning commission, et cetera. So we went through a chronology, and I'll just highlight some of the items that just shows when council and other entities were involved. So in September 2020, Crafton Boulevard landscape identified as an opportunity site in the Planning Commission Workshop Session 2. That was the first public discussion associated with this in 2020 of September. Then in November 2020, Crafton Boulevard streetscape concepts were presented at an engineering committee meeting. So that was, taking that direction from the Planning Commission workshop, and there were discussions along the way during the streetscape concept during the engineering committee meetings. And so there was a streetscape concept presented in November. In January of 2021, council adopts a resolution authorizing the CITIF grant for the streetscape. This was to provide funding, and there is a significant amount of funding for this project, which is always great news. In February, we presented the design development plans and renderings to Planning Commission Workshop number 4. In April, the Crafton Boulevard streetscape was awarded by council to Independent Enterprises. That was a public meeting. That was the award of the construction for the Crafton Boulevard project. Then in May, streetscape is mentioned during community announcements. There was a record in the minutes of that being mentioned and read aloud. Summer 2021, the streetscape project mentioned, and it made the Crafton Courier as explaining the project in detail to some degree, and then also just informing the public of the project and its highlights. And then finally, in April 2022, council adopted the change order for the bump outs in phase 2. So this has been a process that has been going on for a while. It has been very public and open, and I didn't even read, the other half of the items, but these were all mainly related to meeting at the engineering committee, and where constant design development changes and preferences and options were discussed and direction was given. So this is an engineering design project which obviously we would need the detail from what does the community want, right? So we're designers, and we don't live here. Well, some of our employees do, but so we obviously want the natural preference and flavor from municipality. So that was a very successful collaboration over those years. Now, another thing that we've heard or questioned was what design standards were used here, and was this just Gateway doing design work? So we listed the design standards, some of the design standards that were used, and so I'll just read those quickly. And there are links to each one of these so that you're able to go and look more in detail if you prefer. But one is PennDOT's Traffic Calming Handbook, Pub 383. That is a particularly helpful document. Also, the U.S. Department of Transportation Federal Highway Admin, two particular sections, 4B, alternatives to traffic control signals, revising the geometrics at intersections, which is what we're talking about, to add pedestrian median refuge islands and or curb extensions. So traffic calming, section 23, curb extensions, and lastly, the National Association of City Transportation Officials. This and Crafton being having a lot of urban elements to it, talks about the urban street design and curb extensions. So wanted to get that straight. So you have a list of those references as well. Then we thought, and believe me, I'm going to get to the project and the specifics here in a minute, but trying to build a background here. So next was just some general questions and some facts that we thought we'd put together that would help folks understand if traffic calming and streetscape design is new to you. So what is traffic calming? I'm not going to read all this, just that, you know, there is a definition and there is a source of the definition, the Institute of Transportation Engineers. So it's geared towards, you know, reducing the negative effects and negative behaviors of drivers. So once again, if you remember what those objectives were initially, it's all about safety. It's all about making this area more friendly to a bedroom community, a walkable community. So these questions, if you look, all hone in on that. And that's why the streetscape was the obvious choice based on hearing, you know, what the elements were or what the preferences were for this corridor. What is traffic calming? It's obviously methods to address reducing speed, cut through traffic, and just calming and slowing the traffic in general, and providing additional safety as it relates to crossing these streets. You know, many of the streets in Crafton are really wide, and that just makes exposure to a resident crossing that street much higher and being hit. So squeezing those pedestrian walkways is reducing the amount of exposure to injury. Next, are curb extensions and bump outs okay to use on a street like Crafton Boulevard? Curb extensions and bump outs are an acceptable traffic calming measure and may be used on local roads, collectors, and arterials up to 15 average daily transports with posted speeds less than 40. So Crafton Boulevard's ADT is 5,500. So it certainly applies for this technology. And if you look at those references there, you'll see that it is well sourced. Why are the curb extensions and bump outs typically used? Reducing the crossing time and distance for pedestrians. I just mentioned that. You'll see that in the drawings as we show. Improve the line of sight for pedestrians and for drivers. We'll talk about that too. As drivers are able to come up and get perpendicular to Crafton Boulevard, there is a much better view for them in pulling out, Baldwick specifically. So making pedestrians more visible to the oncoming traffic. You know, with the sidewalks and the buildings, pedestrians can be hidden to traffic, especially speeding traffic. Slowing the vehicles making turns by reducing the curb radiuses. This sounds like this is the actual issue that we're talking about, or seems to be the biggest issue. Yes, you reduce the curb radiuses so that you do slow the person making the turn around the bend. That's intentional. That's part of the traffic calming technique. And prevent illegal parking near corners and intersections. That is a full nemesis to these turning radiuses, and as well as large or emergency vehicles trying to make a turn. You can't move a vehicle. You can't run over a vehicle. You may be able to drive over a curb, but when the vehicle's there, that's basically like a wall. So putting these bump outs does not allow that illegal parking next to corners and along the curb. Do they work? Most curb extensions result in speed reductions of 1 to 2 miles per hour, and in some cases have a potential to reduce speeds of up to 5 miles per hour. I think we're more like the 5 miles per hour on Crafton Boulevard because it was a very wide and busy and fast street. I think we're going to see, and even as the mayor has already indicated, potentially high reduction in speeding. But why that's important is the standard risk of death for a pedestrian hit by a car at 23 miles per hour is 10%. That risk increases to 50% if you're driving 42 miles per hour. That's 50% probability of death being hit at that speed. On an average, every 1 mile per hour decrease in the speed results in a 2.8% lower chance of death in vehicle versus pedestrian crashes. So just in 2 miles per hour is a 5% reduction in that death statistic. So extremely important for a minor reduction in speed. Will the bump outs make it harder for a fire truck to get to Crafton Elementary School? That was a specific question. The answer is no. Vehicle turning templates were analyzed to ensure the Crafton's volunteer fire department's largest truck and mutual aid response vehicles from Green Tree will be able to navigate through the new streetscape. In some cases, access is the same or even potentially better, since the bump outs will provide drivers from illegally parking vehicles too close to the intersection. That is really key, is as I mentioned, there's no play, there's no room for error, there's no give when a car is parked either on the opposite side or on the same side as where the turning is happening, or where even the overturning has to happen. So essentially just trying to show that, and these aren't our opinions. These are from these references and that are provided here. So another answer to the question about the fire truck and the Crafton Elementary School, which we think is very relevant, from 2014 to 2018, structure fires in schools across the United States, including, and this is everything, daycares, nurseries, elementaries, middle, junior, high school, college classrooms, adult education centers, results in an average of 1 civilian death annually. So very small number, but in comparison, there were 359 fatal pedestrian incidents among children, just children under the age of 19. And the percentage of speeding related pedestrian crashes involving children ages 15 and under more than doubled in the last 3 years. So we feel that is the real issue here, is the statistic shows that drivers struck and killed an estimated 7,500 pedestrians in 2021, the most pedestrian deaths in a single year in the last 40 years. So once again, improving the safety of the intersections and the roads has a much greater impact on the safety of the community. And we are not trading the safety of one for another. We're showing that these avenues to get to schools and to maneuver these intersections is doable. So let's get into some of the project drawings. So first drawing, if you want to look at your handout versus, it might be harder to see up on the screen. So if you don't have a handout, you want one, grab it. So let's go right to the bottom left of the drawing, and you'll see that is Baldwick Road, which comes out and intersects with Crafton Boulevard. If you look at the red lines, all of the red lines were the existing curbs. So you can see where the curb used to be. You can see that on the drawing as well. So can you zoom in on that a little bit more, just right at the intersection of Baldwick and Crafton Boulevard. So let's take a look at a couple things. Look at the red line versus, if you can scroll, Alberto, on the new curb lines. So if you see that thin double line, that represents the curb. You see it's marked proposed curb, R15. That's the new curb. So look at the crosswalk. Look where it says new crosswalk. And look at the distance between the old curbs and the new curbs. And there's a significant less walking distance for the pedestrian to cross that street. Can you show that? I'm looking up on Crafton Boulevard right there. So you see that white areas, those are the bump outs. So in between those two black bars are where a pedestrian would cross. So if you look at where the red is, look how far back the red lines are, you see you have an extended exposure to crossing that street. So that's just one safety improvement for every pedestrian walking there. If you look also on Baldwick also has reduced its crossing distance by 20 feet. So we'll get into the turning radiuses in a minute. Next, if you go across the street to on Crafton Boulevard and you see the bump outs, they're white right there, and then go west to right across from Baldwick. So that's where the fire truck or any vehicle would be turning out, and where these bump outs are where illegal parking would be. So imagine, and when you see the turning radius that will show, if you're coming out and driving a truck, whether it's emergency or not, and cars are tightly parked right where those bump outs are, that makes that very difficult to maneuver. And that happens. We even took a snapshot of showing when there were two illegally parked cars in a spot where someone might say, oh, that never happens. Oh, people obey the laws here. They won't park at the corner. So we're saying that's not true. It will happen. So once again, whether there's a bump out there or a car parked there, the bump out is far superior to the car parked. Once again, you can't drive over a car with a truck. But on occasion, if the driver misses the swing or whatever and doesn't want to back up, he can hump the curb. So we see that as a win for the fire company as well as the pedestrians. So the rest of here is just showing you the red lines, which indicate that the curbs, other than the bump out areas, really haven't changed. The width of the road is essentially the same, except where we squeeze the road for traffic calming, slowing traffic, making safety better for the residents and the pedestrians. So one other thing to look at is the mayor mentioned this. If you go up to the entrance to the apartments and you see that what's that say, R5, and it's pointing to that curved radius, the other one there. So that is depressed. And so when a truck or any large vehicle that doesn't think it can make that turn, it can and probably will run over that depressed curb. Once again, making it available to turn in. Now you see where the old curb line was, where the red line is. So you might say, wow, there's a huge area that you're taking away for vehicles to turn in. But essentially, what I said is, as the vehicle moves over, it's over 3 or 4 feet for the sidewalk, but when it turns, it can cut that corner on the sidewalk. So there is, and we'll show it in the turning radius maps. It is very maneuverable. In fact, it's almost identical to before the sidewalk was installed. So those are some of the features I just wanted to show on the intersection in question. And I wanted to just hit some of the highlights. You feel free to take these and look at them. I did want to show you that the red lines indicate that there is not an overall reduction in the roadway width. All right, next slide takes us up through the project to Clearview Avenue. So if you look again at the red line, you'll see that if you remember when you're coming up Crafton Boulevard, you just made that wide turn. You see where the red sidewalk is, and you see all the area now that we've encapsulated with sidewalk. So what that's doing is bringing the traffic, and I neglected to say this on Baldwick, but it's the exact same feature. Before, you used, wherever the car stopped, they stopped. You know, it was different and it was variable. Now you'll pull out because it's a clear location where to stop. Your car will be presented to the oncoming drivers. You'll have a great sight distance and you'll pull out. So these intersections where they're super wide and on an angle, that is not an acceptable ingress and egress to these streets. So they need to be turned into a 90-degree to improve and maximize the amount of safety for the vehicles, pedestrians in both directions. So anyway, that's why that is like that, straightening that, 90-degreeing that, and just putting a big open space for walking and also then to walk up to Clearview Avenue. So we'll show that turning radius in a minute as well. Pardon me? Yes, good point. So this is the first phase of the streetscape. The next phase runs from Dinsmore to Clearview. Okay, so the reason for mentioning that is we took this same design and we moved it into the next phase of streetscape and submitted it to PennDOT. We have the permit back from PennDOT. They know all of the features. They approve them. So once again, just this is not some new technology. The permits back, PennDOT's approved it. It was designed with their and the federal standards. So that's a good point, Alberta. Thanks. Okay, next. So let's get into the some of the turning radiuses that we've talked about. And so you know, this is a software. It's a conservative software. It's used countlessly on projects like this, only as a sanity check. If you design the intersection according to the standards, these will bear out that the vehicles can make the turns. So we started just with a large sized, a typical vehicle, a Chevy Suburban, could be a pickup truck. And you can see to the left is the existing condition, the old curb line, and to the right is the new curb line. And you see, once again, the turn is sharper on the new proposed condition. And I should say the now new existing condition because it's installed. So it does slow you down. It makes you look and it calms traffic. Whereas in the past, that intersection was so wide and wild and open, and it was a cowboy game every time I came through it. It made you nervous. You go to the left, all you see is a building. When you look to the left, you have to stick out into the street, and then someone comes up and gives you the horn for sticking out too far. So the new design allows you to get aligned, get perpendicular, and positioned to make a safe entry into the road. So you can see that is equal in turning. Next is an ambulance. So we took a look at a Ford E-Series ambulance. You can see to the left what the turning used to be, and to the right what the new radius in the bump out does, and it's the same turn. Oops, sorry. Next is the fire truck, and the model was run on a 40-foot fire truck, and this is actually a little larger than Crafton's, but it may be similar to the Green Tree truck. But so this one's a little different. You can see that the old turn, the front of the vehicle, and I'm sorry, I should have said that. The green line represents the vehicle body, and the red lines represent the tires. So when you see the green line, that's where the body swings out as the tires are turning. So should have mentioned that. But in this case, you can see there was a slight entry into the opposing lane for the truck, and now there is a significant entry into the lane for the truck. So, but I'd argue that flashers and sirens and trucks and emergency vehicles going through red lights and not obeying the street laws is typical. So once again, this turn would have to be maneuvered expertly by a driver and with the lights and when it's safe. So this maneuver, we would think, would not happen in an infinitesimal amount compared to all of the traffic that does pass through here. So if you compare the number of times that the ladder truck will make this maneuver and compare that to the number of times that every other vehicle that uses this road makes that maneuver, it is a massive difference. So my point is that this project was not designed to make the fire trucks maneuver better. Unfortunately, that's not really a project. But it has to be considered that they can safely pass and expertly drive the trucks in a safe and expeditious manner to get to an emergency situation. So that's what this shows. So yes, it is more of a turn. It is more of a maneuver to make. But once again, compared to all the safety elements and all the other benefits that everyone will have on a daily basis, hundreds, if not thousands of times a day, it makes sense to us. So next, wanted to just show some other areas. Here's Bradford Court. Got a couple pictures here so you can see where the telephone pole is, and then you can see where that yellow curb is. Now, if you look to the right, you see the telephone pole, and now you see a sidewalk and a depressed curb over by the cones to replace it. So once again, if you look above, you see the red, and this is for the ladder truck. You see the red tires coming in, making the left, and the difference here is as he swings out, and we're showing that the tires do not go over the depressed curb. But if they did, that would obviously bring that vehicle in. So once again, the truck can make the maneuver. And if you look at it, it's the same route. It ends up in the same place. It just does make a wider turn to get into that facility. Next is Vance Way. We heard some questions about Vance Way. Just wanted to show that that a truck, once again, before and after, nothing's really changed at Vance Way. Those two bump outs really don't have an impact associated with the turn, even whether there's a car there or if there's a curb there and the driver doesn't make it on the first round. You know, maybe they don't drive these trucks that often, and sometimes folks are rusty. If they don't make it and they hop the curb, I know that's not the best scenario, but if they drive it expertly, they'll make the turn. If they're a little off, they'll hop the curb. If there's a car parked there, they're backing up. So the curb, once again, those bump outs, from a safety standpoint, they get people out on Vance. They get you squared with the intersection and a safer exit onto the road. Also, there is an added protection to the parking. You know, even something simple as, you know, someone on their phone, not paying attention, sort of veering over, they're going to hit that curb and hopefully bounce off and not hit the parked vehicles. If there's a parked vehicle there, they're going to hit the vehicle, push the vehicle into the one in front of it, et cetera. So even snow and sliding. And so there's even some protection for the parked cars as a result of these bump outs too. Okay, so I said going into the Clearview Avenue, you can see how that the fire truck, the ladder truck would make the turn, the red and the green again. So, you know, it's an easy maneuver to get up there. If you look above and you see how it wraps around onto Clearview Avenue, that turns a little tougher, but that's makeable too. Okay, so one other thing we wanted to mention is that so since Baldwick seems to be the biggest area of concern, this is a little busy. But if you look in the center in the orange square, it says Crafton Boulevard Streetscape Project, Baldwick to Dinsmore. So if you go down Baldwick, or if you can point to that weight limit, down at the hot dog shop, there is a sign for a weight limit of 5 tons, which means that 5 tons is basically a pedestrian vehicle, a truck. Now there are local deliveries and there are folks that sneak through anyway, but we've shown that the turning radiuses can be made. But my point is that coming up Baldwick or coming from the bridge, the big bridge down Crafton Boulevard, those are all 5-ton limits. And so once again, the larger vehicles are limited here. This is not a busy intersection for tractor trailers. And I'm not saying they don't show up and they don't disobey the law. I'm only saying that if they do, they can make the turns or take the gamble that they chose when they went there. And then there's a couple pictures here at the bottom, and this is where, let's see, is that Bradford, where Bradford comes up and turns. So you can see this is an 18-wheeler with a tractor illegally coming through there, but he did make the turn. So once again, just to show that these roads are still maneuverable. However, just getting folks to pay more attention. All right, so last picture, no, second to last, is just a bird's view of the streetscape itself. Missed one. So just to show that it's really nice, and it looks really nice. And I know we're going to talk about a little functionality here, but well, if you can't see it on the screen, if you look at your drawing, it just shows the trees. Now, these are very mature trees. We're going to be planting 2-inch trees, so they're not going to be this great out of the gate. But you'll see that the vegetation that's planted, and it is just a pleasant atmosphere, and it's geared towards people walking. Eventually, there may be lighting, benches, things of that nature. So just wanted you to take a look at the positive side of this. The projects we've been involved in streetscapes, people are very excited. They celebrate these. And I know that Crafton is excited too. And I know that maybe there's a little bit of trepidation related to the changes. They look scary. But we're trying to show is it's accepted practice. It's here already in Pittsburgh. It's being utilized. If it didn't work, you would hear complaints and problems and outcries and backlashes for these sort of things. So in the places that I mentioned are busier and even smaller areas, and they work. So just trying to get that point across. Aside from us saying, as professionals, this will work, it's really nice too. So I guess you're not going to get to see that on the TV. And then the last drawing, just to show you that folks do park, right at the corner of a road, and this is obviously coming out of Vance. So if a truck had to, if a fire truck had to maneuver that, he can't really swing in to the right because the red car's there and the white car's, cutting him off from, getting too close to that corner. So it does happen, and what we're putting in, although we don't have a bump out in the red car. The white car is simulating a bump out the point was that it does happen, that folks do park where they shouldn't park. So that is it. So sorry that it took a little longer than most hoped, but I wanted to spend some time to hopefully get everybody on the same page and understand where we come from as professionals, and that we don't take this lightly. We do this for a living. We're very proud of what we've presented to you, and really are excited that you continue with this process to beautify and make your area safer.
Thank you, Rick. The process that we'll go through for this is that we're going to take public comments now. So I'll go through the rules for public comments. You'll be able to speak then. For the ones that are associated with this project, we'll have the engineer be able to respond to those at that point. Later on in the agenda, we're going to go through the Community and Infrastructure Committee. We're going to have council discussion regarding this item too. In case council has questions or has any concerns, those can be discussed at this time. So after the Gateway responds, if there's any other folks that would like to speak about anything else on the agenda, we'll allow them to go through that. Then at the end of the meeting, we'll take public comments for anything else that's not on the agenda. So I'll read this. It's public comments on agenda items. At this time, citizens may address the Crafton Borough Council on any issue appearing on today's agenda. Only residents and taxpayers of the Borough of Crafton would be permitted to address the council. Comments on non-agenda items will be taken at the end of tonight's meeting. Speakers will be permitted to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes. Groups of people will be required to designate a spokesperson to represent them before council and may speak for a maximum of 5 minutes. Please sign in and or raise your hand on Zoom and state your name and physical address for the record. Can you get the sign-in sheet? I can't. So we'll go through the in-person folks first, then we'll go through Zoom. All right. The first person we have is, let's see, Streetscape. Okay, Robert and Angel.
Well, first I'll apologize. I'm not as prepared as I would like to be.
Okay.
And typically I'm the kind of guy that's behind the curtain making things happen, not the actor on the stage in the spotlight. So I'd like to address some of the comments that have been made at previous meetings. Yes, you can count me as one of the line of residents shocked by the design. I have no doubt it's been seen by other members and been approved even in council meetings, but I have questions that the residents have actually seen the idea as a streetscape instead of just a storm sewer project. I appreciate the list of things, but I haven't seen on the website at all where engineering committee meetings are advertised as when I can attend those. I haven't seen notes of those or videos of those. So saying that it happened in that, I would say those should be discounted as they didn't happen in the public. There was a comment that mobility and pedestrian safety, the number one priority is pedestrian safety. I disagree that the number one priority is safety ever, because if the number one priority was pedestrian safety, we should just close the road and make it a pedestrian sidewalk. I appreciate that's not what's going on. It was just a comment that the number one priority isn't ever. And the comment that large vehicles should not be traveling through those areas if they are not local deliveries. Well, PennDOT has identified the corridor in front of the elementary school as the route for tractor trailers from Amazon. So trucks shouldn't be there. Well, PennDOT says they should be. Even if the weight ratings, that's the detour that PennDOT says tractor trailers should be taking. For other comments, I wonder what roadway painting will there be? Is there going to be center lines to make sure we can try not to cross over as much? I see stop lines, crosswalks. Are there going to be other painting? And I wonder, as the classification of the roadway, whether the design fell under, arterials, collectors, or was a local road for the purposes of the design. I have a question about sight triangles. So at the intersection heading eastbound at Bradford, that stop line is being moved back by 5 feet. And in none of the graphics have I seen anything taking into account parked cars on Bradford. Even the existing, pulling up 5 feet past where it is now, where it's proposed to be moved, you still can't see left or until you're at the existing stop line, let alone moving it back 5 feet. And apparently that's all I have because I didn't prepare well enough. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And Robert, could you state your name and physical address for the
Oh, sure.
record?
My name is Robert Engel at 10 Walnut Street.
Thank you.
And I'm taking the questions, so we'll address those at the end. I'm writing them down. Right. Next is David Lasunde.
Need to make this thing taller. Hi, David Lasondak, 10 Baldwick Road, where I have lived for 28 years now. And I'm at the house second from the corner of Baldwick and Crafton Boulevard. I can look out my kitchen window and see Bradford Court. So I essentially live at ground zero for this part of the streetscape. And I was excited at the possibilities as it started getting made. I was less sure because, it's a work in progress. How's it really going to function? But as it comes together, as I have watched and driven on those roads for 28 years, as I have been doing the speed limit on Crafton Boulevard and had people blow around past me because they got to get into a hurry to get in that stop sign that half the people don't stop for anyway, on a street where we routinely have kids, children on bikes, on scooters, a nice family neighborhood. It infuriates me that this goes on. And some of the people who blown past me have older and less and grayer hair than mine. So this isn't just young kids out on a joyride. These are just people who want to be where they want to go. It's already working. I commute every day, most days, to Shady Side and back, usually during peak hours in the morning and in the afternoon. And I'm already seeing things are slowing down. This traffic calming thing, it's working. Now, once it all gets finished, we might find there are some adjustments that have to be made. That's not unusual, but to the people and the twittering that I hear, so to speak, saying this is a horrible waste of money and we should just pull it out now. Well, let's waste more money by destroying what isn't even finished yet. Let it get finished, let it get done, let it work itself out for 6 months, and maybe we make a few adjustments along the way to make it even better. But I think it's a winner and I want to keep it.
Thank you. Great. Mike Crown.
Mike Brown, Crafton Fire Chief. I was here a couple meetings ago, I think. So a couple of questions I had just for first is to discuss, the mayor had presented something from Bradford Court, and so did Mr. Minsterman about the curb being pushed back, it's lower. My issue is we're still asking a 80,000-pound vehicle to drive over curbs. So if you would drive over a curb and blow a tire or an axle or a rim, that then basically ruins any tactics of firefighting in that area. And has it happened? Absolutely. So what we're saying is, hey, look, we've done some curb work, but just drive up over the curb. Well, if anybody drives over curbs, I think a lot of times you'll do damage to your rims or your tires. So I'm not here to poo-poo on the whole streetscape. As I talked to Alberto before, there's ways that I think to help the fire department make it better. From that telephone pole in the mayor's picture, at a 45, come back 3 feet on that curb line or 4 feet on that curb line. As you can see, knock that curb down, make that curb even with the road. That way, when the fire trucks come in, and you're wrong, Mr. Minsterman, because I've answered calls for the last 30 years, and I've driven the trucks into Bradford Court. We have to hug that telephone pole. So now you're asking a truck to go over a curb where what's going to happen to the body? It's going to flex. So if you flex that body and it ends up flexing into a telephone pole, now where are we at? Does that make sense? The telephone pole, bring that back on the line, knock that curb down, knock that sidewalk down. If you're going to do zero curb line and make it a sidewalk, you're asking for something that will help the fire service. That tremendously will help knock that curb down, make it street level.
Can you draw it on there for us?
Yes,
So flush it.
flush it so that you don't have to go up over a curb. Anytime you're asking a fire truck or any vehicle to go up over a curb, you're asking for a tire blowout, rim blowout, and the worst case scenario is the torque and the tension on the axle snaps that axle. So now that truck is now incapacitated and everything else can't get in there. And that's a high fire load area. So I'm not saying do away with the whole streetscape. That was never my plan at the last meeting. My plan is there got to be some alternatives to make it work. Second thing that the mayor had brought up is the idea of Vance Alley. Concurrent, that's untrue. We've demonstrated and we've trained and we've answered calls at the school. So when somebody makes the comment, and I've made this last meeting, I think it missed some of you, is our first due engine, our first water source goes to the back. So when you take the hydrant, we'll leave here, go up Noble Avenue. There's a hydrant at the corner of Noble and Crafton. You will lay lines in from that hydrant up into the back of the school. You don't pass up the corner because there's collapse zones. So you would stop short. That then renders that area of the alley, we can't get any more trucks in on that side. Well, collapse zone is if it's burning, and then that end of at that end of the building, when you go up the driveway, that's the auditorium and gym end. So again, heavy fire load, not much containing that fire. It gets up into those clock lofts, and what happens? It burns there, and that's a high area for a collapse zone. So you're incapacitated. That truck's done. Water lines pulled off it. The next trucks do come in, and we've got them in Vance Alley to the alley behind the school. If you're asking that we can come off Creighton Avenue, no, because the turn dog legs back. So you're driving up and you got to pass a 90-degree and come back into the alley. Whereas you're coming off Crafton Boulevard to Vance. You can see that
the turn and not hit Chelsea's garage?
we do it all the time. We hug this side right here and we make that turn right in there. Now, are we going to? We've done it.
In the alley, right?
You're again arguing with people that do it every day. Okay, so that leads me to believe that we're just shutting our blind eye to it. So my solution to that is, as you come, we can't come off of Bradford onto Crafton Boulevard to make the right. So if the trucks are coming up Noble to Crafton Boulevard, make that first bump out an angle instead of a rounded bump out. And on that, again, you buy some width. You're not jumping curbs. You're not doing all those things. You still get the streetscape idea, and you're moving that back. Because again, there's a bump out on the other side of the street. If you try to come from Bradford to Crafton Boulevard, you can't get wide enough because of the bump out to make the turn into the alley. You've got, I'm here to work out something that's amicable to everybody. And by cutting that bump out down to an angle less, into the street, that helps everybody, in my opinion, in the fire service.
What were the two streets? Noble and which one? Noble and
Noble.
the curb.
Oh, that would be the bump out Vance on the Noble end of Vance Alley. So those two are, in my opinion, paramount for us to do our jobs as a fire protection. Mr. Mishman, you're great. I can look all the statistics in the world and I can find out every fire and all that. That was good work. I mean, when we pay a lot of money, that's great work to do that research. I appreciate that. But if anybody has children in the elementary school, you're just a statistic now. Because I've asked at the last meeting, I was told I would be provided a speed study that was done. Was it done? I was told traffic study would be provided because that's what we base the streetscape on, and the accident data at those intersections. Has anybody provided that? Have they been done? Because last meeting I was told that was all done. That's what driven us. And to the other gentleman's comments,
Mike.
I'm going to keep
Yeah.
this. Okay. My
Yeah.
comment to that is advertisements. The advertisement, all these things, I was on council. I know that these meetings were held at Gateway. I went to the meetings at Gateway when it can pertain to public works. So we didn't see all the information that was provided tonight as a council or as anything else. And those meetings were held for lunch, whatever, at Gateway, and our people half the time I didn't even know. So with that being said, my last thing is the idea of Crafton Boulevard. Again, you're going to ask a fire truck to make a 90-degree turn and then make another angle turn to get up there. Is it tough at the top, Crafton or Clearview Avenue extension onto Clearview to the right? Absolutely. But now you're hindering the bottom. If there's cars down there, all those types of things, you're hindering it. As Mr. Sample and some others talked about, it's going to add 30 seconds to a minute. I agree. Do me a favor. Go ahead, NFPA studies, NIOSH studies, National Institute of Fire Science studies, and see fires double how often? Every 30 seconds. A trash can in an apartment can be a fully involved apartment in 30 seconds. So I'm just asking for a little bit of consideration.
What was that? That was was that Starrett and Crafton Boulevard?
It was Crafton Boulevard Clearview Extension.
Okay.
He has the 90-degree, which again, you're asking trucks with body flexions. You have pipes on trucks. I wish that it was all good that we can just drive the truck. But you have body flexion, you have all the plumbing to the trucks, you have the aerial, the gearbox. And again, we used a E1 fire truck, right? What was the wheelbase?
Mike, what's the wheelbase on that?
228. What was the
Right.
gearboxes? What was the angle that you
Right.
could actually turn?
I'd have to check. I mean, that's.
Because all these things, and all I'm saying is why I'm asking, and I know you're saying settle, but I'm asking because these things aren't traditionally the same that is currently available today.
And to make the statement, you're our fire chief, so giving the extra time is really important, and that's.
I'm trying, I have no skin in the game. We're trying to protect residents. That's all my skin in the game is.
Right. And I appreciate those comments, and we'll address them as part of the comments too. Okay, the last person in person is Chris O'Brien. State your name and your address.
Chris O'Brien, 1828 Crafton Boulevard. I'm where the construction's going on. Construction's been going on for a month now. I can't go in and out the front of my house. I haven't been. I have a problem. There's 2 homes that are affected, yet nothing's been done to make it easy to get in and out while everything's torn up. Also, I have a driveway where the bump out is. Imagine. When I pull into my drive, I do not park on the front street. I've always backed in, and I appreciate the fact that people picking up their children can no longer park in front of my house to get their children on rainy days because they won't block my driveway. But when I go to pull in my driveway from the right, the bump out is a little tight because part of my driveway was taken. Now I realize there's wiggle on who owns what part. So I don't have a problem with that. I just think it's going to cause problems down the road. If something could be done to, I don't know, pull back like a foot, 6 inches, might give me a little bit more of an easier angle. What I find myself doing is going more into the left lane to make my right into my driveway. And I think if you take a look, come into my driveway, help yourself, drive in. I also normally back into that driveway if I'm going to park in the driveway. So hopefully you're not going to put a bump out on the other side of my driveway, because then I will have a big problem. Crafton Boulevard traffic won't go.
Chris, can you show us where you are on the map?
My name's on that map. I'm right at the bump out. Right across from Baldwick Road. Baldwick Road dead ends into my driveway. That kind of gives you a picture.
Oh. Okay.
Okay, that's all I've got to say. And if you're going to continue this through Crafton, I think it might be nice to find out the people you're going to adversely impact for a month. What's the age of those people? What's the health? Can they get in and out of their house any other way? I think that's a very respectable question. And should a professional know to do that? I think so. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you. Thank you. Great. We don't have anybody in person. Do we have anybody in Zoom that's raised their hand? 2 people?
Yeah, we'll go with Jimmy Pletcher first. Jimmy, I'm gonna go ahead and allow you to talk. Please state your name and physical address for the record after you unmute.
My name is Jim Pletcher. I live at 107 East Crafton Avenue. I am also a member of Crafton Fire Department. I think Mike Crown reiterated a lot of the concerns that we have. But I had for me, looking at your turning radius statistics that you showed tail swing coming off of Baldwin on Crafton Boulevard. At Vance Alley, you don't show no tail swing. It just, the truck turns and there's no swing. The way your model shows, we'd be ripping off the back of cars and still not clear the alley. I agree with what Mike said to angle the bump outs or something to that effect to give a little more space. As far as Bradford Courts Apartments go, your model shows us turning 90 degrees into that parking lot. But with the grade and slope of that entrance, if we come in at 90 degrees from Crafton Boulevard, we completely will ground out our rigs and render them useless. It's just not feasible. That's my two biggest concerns, and that's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you, Jimmy.
All right, I'll go ahead and allow Cody Sheets to talk. Feel free to unmute and state your name and address for the record.
Cody Sheets, 152 Promenade. You know, for the last week, I've obsessed over this issue so much so that I went to the site and attempted to gauge the safety of the issue for myself. And let me make it abundantly clear that the only thing I care about here is my kids' safety. You know, being able to get to my kids. And when I first heard about there being a potential safety issue with the fire department being able to get to my kids at the school, I was floored. I was angry. I asked myself, like, how could council's decision be so negligent and indifferent? And, you know, judging from how it was presented, it seemed as though the fire department was saying my kids were in imminent danger, that there were massive obstructions that would make it impossible for them to reach my kids, that there'd be no way for them to get to my babies if they were in danger, that others' loved ones would also be in jeopardy. And you can imagine how seriously I took that as a parent. But when I went to the site, I saw that there weren't massive obstructions. There were big curbs that stick out from a sidewalk and into the road. Not a single one of them is higher than 6 inches from the ground. And my Ford Escape could easily scale every single one of them. I felt dumb, ignorant, and embarrassed for being so upset and angry about something that I didn't even go take a look at myself. I saw that there were certainly no obstructions or curb changes at the Noble Avenue intersection with the alley behind Crafton Elementary. And then I thought to myself, how much sense would it make for a fire department to go all the way up Bradford Avenue and then on to Crafton Boulevard to turn onto the alley behind the school when they could simply make a right out of the fire station and then a left less than a quarter mile up the road. You know, then I considered the fact that these trucks can easily go over these curbs and bump outs, and that if my kids were in danger, Chief, I would expect the fire department to destroy any obstruction, run over any curb, and if need be, destroy your trucks to get to my kids, because I would gladly pay for a new curb or a truck because my kids' lives are not replaceable and of a priceless value. Ultimately, anyone with eyes and common sense can see that this issue doesn't make it impossible for the fire department to reach my babies. Today's day and age, we cannot take our children's safety lightly. We cannot ignore one single potential thing that would endanger their lives. We've seen examples of how delicate and precious each day our kids is with mass shootings in elementary school that we just watched a few months ago as 21 innocent babies and school teachers were senselessly killed while at school. So please understand the passion behind this next statement. I will never sit back and be silent or watch as someone in my community attempts to use the lives of my kids as a means to an end or as bait to serve an agenda, especially those in our town. Frankly, I question anyone's ability to lead who would do such a thing. And those who have done so should be ashamed of themselves. I will not stand by as my kids are used as a ploy to pull at the hearts and minds of citizens, because being angry about new curbs or bump outs will never be a rational or justifiable decision to bring my kids' lives into the mess. I close.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Sheets. All right. I've written down the questions that everybody's had, so I'll just.
We didn't sign, but then there was new information, and I would like to say just one thing.
Sure. Okay.
All right.
Just state your name and
Yeah.
where you live.
Lisa Smith, 50 Walnut Street. Well, I see what you guys are trying to do, and it looks like it'll be beautiful when it's done. It really does. I understand. My only problem is it used to be, because there's no bump outs, the people would just pull down Crafton Boulevard, pull off to the side of the road and park. Now they're not going to be able to do that. They're going to have to parallel park. Most everybody here in Crafton is used to parallel parking. That's about all we have. So it shouldn't be that big of a deal, except for traffic coming down, traffic coming up. Now you've got people parallel parking. My biggest concern is you took fire trucks, but did you take the school buses into consideration? Because I drive a school bus and we come down Baldwick and have to make that right. We come down there during traffic. We're not going to make that turn. How many people are going to stop and let us make that turn? We're going to be on their side. I just, did anybody, think about school buses?
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Reese?
Hello, I'm Reese Smith. I also live at 50 Walnut Street. And I want to just say that I walked to school in 3rd through 6th grade. I've crossed that intersection thousands of times, and it's been, I haven't had any issues. So I want to talk about a bit about the simulations, computer simulations of the various radiuses of turning for these vehicles. And you see, yes, they can all technically make it, but if you look, you see these turns going from having plenty of room in the intersection to being incredibly tight. Oftentimes on both sides, left and right, both being very tight. So this sort of takes into account that people have to be really good drivers. And I mean, that's just, I don't think that's a realistic assumption for our models, that people are really good drivers. So that's one thing. As well, I also want to touch on the fact about the notice and informing the community about these happening. There's a difference between just sort of having it out there and actively promoting it. If I just put a sign outside my house, yeah, it's publicly available, anyone can come see it. But does anyone really know about it? And that's the big difference, and that's where the disconnect's happening. Whereas we're saying, we didn't know, and you're saying, how could you not know? We posted about it or whatever. But just having it publicly available and actually promoting it and making sure people are aware of it in the community are two different things. As well, I also want to bring up the question of who's going to care for the greenery that's going to be added. I love greenery. I know it's really good, especially in this concrete jungle. Adding more green spaces allows for better water runoff and better water absorption into the ground. However, who's going to care for that? If it's going to be the people whose basically the people whose greenery is in front of their house, if they're taking care of it, how much talking to them about that did happen? If it's not going to be them, how can we trust the borough to actually maintain that? Because I know that we have a tree right near our house that is on borough property. The longest time, the electric company kept coming by, cutting one side to keep it out of the power lines, had it completely start to become lopsided, start threatening to fall onto our house. We told the borough, and the borough told us to go pound sand. They would not do anything for us, and we had to go pay and to get it removed ourselves. So I am very well aware of the issues that happen when the borough is supposed to maintain something, but then they do not. As well, I want to talk a bit about this bump out across from the actual intersection of Braddock. It was touched on a bit here, is that sure that the lanes themselves may not be narrower, but the thing is that right here where this big bump out is, there weren't any cars parked there. There was essentially more road. It was essentially a wider road. People would pull up essentially right where this sidewalk starts right here is where people would pull up to look down this road, because it's a long road and it curves, and you have to make sure you can get around to actually see the cars, and you're taking it up. People have to be more out to the side, to be further forward to see down it. As well is that basically people drove here from this side. They would come and they'd drive pretty much where this sidewalk is and then go swerve out a little more to go back into the normal center of the road. And it made that intersection a lot wider. And now you're making that intersection even smaller and even harder to navigate. As well, I want to talk overall about the traffic calming. Is no one's denying it's going to calm traffic. Everyone's saying, oh, it's going to slow us down for sure. No one's denying that. The question is, was it all worth it? Was the slowing down of all this traffic worth all the hassle that this is causing? I personally do not think that is. Some people do, but I think that's where the conversation needs to largely be framed. No one's denying it's slowing down traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, Reese. All right. think we have all the public comments. The next step, I have 15 questions I wrote down from everybody for the engineers. So that's, we don't want to have a long time, but we do want to address them because they're important. So I'll go through the questions in order of how I saw them come from the residents. And then if the engineers can address those. And then after that, we will move on to the agenda, the other agenda items, and there will be a discussion under the infrastructure committee from council. Okay, the first one was the Amazon truck and PennDOT. So PennDOT has authorized Amazon, according to the one resident, that they can drive their trucks around our area, and were those taken into consideration for Crafton?
Yeah, I'm not aware of that, Doug. Or do you know, wouldn't they have contacted Crafton or Mike, anything like that?
Yeah, it's not a state highway, so.
But that's not the area we're talking about.
No.
Right, that's further up where the trucks are forced away from the project, actually. They're turned away before they get here. So that's different than what the resident had said.
In addition, you would have needed to get a HOP permit like we would have had up at Crafton Boulevard and Clearview Extension.
Right, it's a local road.
Okay.
So Ben shouldn't have jurisdiction.
Okay. The painting, the roadway paintings.
That's all in the plans. There are crosswalks and all the necessary striping that is required.
I think I think the resident was referring to this like center lines and.
Oh, I thought you said crossing.
Center lines and I think the other now they're not delineated. Parking spaces are delineated.
Okay.
It could be added if it was something someone thought they needed, but it's not required from a design standpoint. It's a slow enough speed, or I'm not sure the exact criteria.
The classification of the roadway. I didn't write all the notes around it, but it was.
Arterials, collectors, local roads.
Yes.
What was the classification and standard that was used? It's certainly a collector.
And what does that mean?
So a local road is more of your type streets. Collector roads are the next step up, kind of your 2-lane that those roads feed into. And arterial roads are control 4-lane signals that extend towards the interstate.
A collector road. Okay.
And there's even different classifications.
Okay. The site triangles on Bradford where parked cars are on Bradford, and are we addressing those site triangles? We can't hear you.
That is something that our traffic engineers did look at, was the side triangles. We went out there, we measured them physically, did the field measurements for that intersection specifically. And then as far as the next question about moving stop bars, he was saying that they moved it 5 feet. Well, I'll have to look at that. I'm not aware of us moving across the stop bars at the intersection of Bradford. So that's something.
It's currently painted on the pavement versus where the plans show it painted. It's about 5 or 6 feet different.
We'll have to I'll have to check that.
Okay. Then going to Mr. Crown's questions, the 80,000-pound vehicle driving over curbs, blowing a tire and rim and knocking out the curb. Is there a way to have it flushed down on Bradford so it doesn't have to go over the curbs versus a fire truck going over those?
Of course, there's a way, just, without looking at the engineering and the design of the curb, I mean, because you're sacrificing something else. Now you're sacrificing something related to the pedestrians walking on the curb. If there's a curb height for a reason, now we're going to remove that, and then that will degrade to some degree the effectiveness of the sidewalk. So I'm not saying that it's good or it's bad or which one is better. What I've said throughout the presentation is that the designs are based on safety of pedestrians and drivers, and that these maneuvers by the trucks, we can actually found even more incidences. Mike, you could even talk about there was one of the standards, I think it was the federal highway standard that preferred the trucks, the fire trucks drive over the curbs. Is that correct? Am I saying that right?
It was an accepted design standard when curb bump outs and extensions are used, that Federal Highway Administration directs large vehicles to drive over curbs.
But I think Mr. Crown was referring to just having a slope curve, so you're not driving over.
So, and where the wheel would have to go over in this case, even if no changes are made right now, it is not a full 6-inch curve. The curve is tapering down at that point. So I was looking at the sketch, it's estimated probably 4 inches at that point. So it's getting to that point where it's going to be flat.
Right, and my point is that with the Federal Highway Administration recommending it, then I think Mr. Crown's fears are in the minority as far as those incidences happening. Otherwise, I don't think a federal agency would recommend that if tires are blown and trucks are disabled and damaged on a regular basis. So I don't know anything about a fire truck. I just know when agencies make recommendations and standards that have been around for years and years and years, they usually flush themselves out if they don't work. If those situations occur on a regular enough basis, they'll change the standard. So, I can say hundreds of years, maybe 100+ years in those standards. It's, it hasn't changed much. So I don't know the exact answer to that. Of course, it can be lowered, and then we would have to look at what is sacrificing because of that. But I think it's promising to know that, as Mike mentioned, Mike McCormick, that it's not the full 6-inch curve, because if you picture where it's at 0 flush with the road, it tapers back over time. So, projecting where they would run that back tire is not the full height of the curb. So that's worth something. So I'm not sure where to go with that, but.
It's also the body flexion. So you're talking, there's so many different avenues that play into that. When you start to go over a curve, the body will flex. So where's the cab in association with the body? Where's that, all those things in?
I mean, you could.
The 0 grade curve, that would take it all out, and it's a terminus of that sidewalk. That sidewalk ends there. So what are you losing? 5 feet of that raised sidewalk, that raised curve?
Yeah, I'm saying I don't know. I'm saying I'm not going to answer now that, oh yeah, it's okay, it's fine. I'm just saying that it's not 6 inches, so that's good. And I hear what you're saying, but it does terminate there, but it also allows all the folks from the apartments to come down and utilize the sidewalk. So once again, just if it's something the council is interested in doing, we could look at it and say, hey, this is not a high risk. It's not a bad trade. But I'd still argue when they head up that driveway into Bedford Apartments, that truck is twisted and turned in all kinds of directions, right? Because it's twisted, it's tilted to the left, it's up and down. And I think it's a 19% grade at one point is what we measured. So I'm just saying that, I know he's not suggesting we make all the driving perfect for all of the trucks, but that's never going to happen, right? So there's accommodations that have to be made, and that could be one of them, depending on what council thinks.
Is there any risk from an ADA perspective that if somebody came with a wheelchair and it was graded, would they not be able to stop?
That's something to look at as well. I mean, that's my point, is that we'd have to just take this through. ADA could say it can't be that flat, it can't be that long. I don't know.
Okay.
Rick, I think just on the ADA aspect, that so ADA and PennDOT requirements also, once the curb radius increases beyond 5 feet, you have to provide a technical warning on tire flush surface. So you can put a flush sidewalk, you can have a massive, let's say 50-foot radius,
but you need to have that tactical warning strip on. So it's kind of a functional and aesthetic thing if you want to get into that. But the way it's designed now, we have the appropriate landing and a tactical warning.
So if we laid that back, what does that do?
You technically need to bring forward a tactical warning.
What are you calling a tactical warning?
Oh, that just the raised bumps.
You just drag that all the way back on the
You
sidewalk.
would need to have that along the flush portion.
Another question was Vance Way and Noble, the bump out angle, pushing it back.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't agree with that. I just think that the Vance Way bump outs they're designed, they're in accordance with the standards. The models show that the turns can be made. I'm not sure why we would just arbitrarily pull them back because someone thinks it's better. You know, Mike made the comment, you're talking to people that do this every day and you're asking them to not do it. So it seems like you have a closed mind when you say, hey, we know you do this for a living, but we know better than you. So I'm just saying in this case, we could do it, but I don't see the benefit for it. It won't change anything.
Right. I think he was referring to that, the bump outs are being done from a safety perspective. That one, by moving it back, won't affect traffic or anything else coming down that area because nobody's going to park right there if there's a bump out that's pushed back. So no car will be.
Yeah, I guess I don't understand the question then. I thought he was talking about pulling it in closer to the curb.
Angling it back.
Pushing it
Back so that it's not.
But what's the purpose? What does it serve?
Gives you a better angle to get into that Vance Alley so we can get into the back of the school. So there's a big dilemma that everybody still doesn't understand. The first fire apparatus will occupy those alleys. The second fire and the second engine and the second truck goes to the back of the truck.
My point is, it's the exact same term. It's the exact same turn. If there's a car parked there, you can't make the turn. It's the same thing.
Your models, Rick, I've done it. I'm just asking. You want to argue all your engineering needs? I'm telling you, physically, we've done it. We've done it. It's not going to work.
What have you done? I don't get
Tried
it.
to make those turns.
Okay.
With the truck now.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. All I'm saying is to meet a middle ground is to take that radius, push it back towards the elementary school so that we can come up in front of the school or another company can come up from in front of the school to make the turn in the Vance Alley.
The left into Vance.
It's the left and the Vance.
And which curb bump out are you talking about?
The
The
one closest to the elementary.
closest to it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Alberto, you have to be close.
One of the things we struggled with is that both sides of that street have chain link fence right at the edge of the road. And that to us seems to be the pinch point, not getting in there. If you try to cut that road any tighter, you're going to be hitting the corner of one of those two properties. So.
Right, but you would still be coming over a curb versus just turning. So there is the possibility, I guess, because these are all questions, remember, there is the possibility to move that back if that was.
Yeah, so you're saying cut that angle off.
Yeah.
And yes, I mean, my
Okay.
instinct is to say no, because that's not how it's designed. But I get the idea of saying, if there is some benefit to that and it does not negatively affect the rest of the design associated with resident, pedestrian, driver safety, things of that nature. A lot of times too, and I'm not saying this is the case, but if you change a design standard, you open yourself up to liability, because the protection in using the standards is that's your protection. You designed it this way, and if there's an accident or a problem or an issue, then the standards protect you. When you tweak the standards and change them, you lose that coverage. So I don't know if that's a big deal here or not. I'm not trying to say, oh, we can't do it, we'll all be sued. It isn't that at all. It's just that we'll look at that, just like we talked about at the apartments. Let's take a close look at it. And if there's pros and cons, we can present that to you.
Okay. The other was the studies, the speed, traffic, and accident studies, and that information.
Well, I remember those discussions. We've not done any studies, traffic studies. And I think, Mike, that's not required to do a streetscape program. I mean, average daily traffic. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I know, Mike, I thought you had a conversation with council saying, do you have these studies?
They said yes.
And I don't know that. I'm just saying, we don't have them, we didn't do them, and they're not required. So.
That's correct. Last time I was here, they were here.
No, I remember.
They would get them to me the next day.
Yeah, I think there was some confusion in them understanding what you were asking for. So.
You talked in your first meeting, I'm sorry to do that. When you said you had your streetscape meeting in September and you had the safety, all the safety. Who was at that meeting? But we're not gonna get into that. But those things were brought up. Why were they brought up? I've talked to the mayor, the former mayor, and people say, hey, people are speeding on my street. They go, look at the speed devices up there. They find those speeding because your 25 miles an hour is different. Your view of that is different than what actually happened. So what studies were used to say, hey guys, do streets. This is what we want to do, which was discussed last week. And the only other thing I'm going to say, and I'm going to be quiet the rest of the time, is if this council is telling us to gear up our trucks to make things work, I hate it. We take a large amount of pride to keep our stuff in ACE #1 condition. We try to keep our trucks 20 to 30 years. But if you want our trucks to look like some of the metropolitan areas or that they don't care about these things, you guys just tell me that's now the policy, and then I'll pass that along. It eats at me. My stomach is flipping that you're saying, drive up, if you got to ruin the truck, ruin the truck. If that's what we want to do, tell me. I'm not going to foot the bill, but you tell me that that's what you guys want to do, and I'm out the door.
Okay. So I think.
So related to the studies.
Yeah.
They're not engineering studies. It's a performance-based, just like you had said. The committee, whether it's through complaints, whether it's through a judgment for the municipality to say, hey, this is a good place to do a project like this for aesthetics, for traffic calming, for slowing the speed, for entering and exiting and making the traffic, the driving traffic safer and updating the codes. So you don't have to have these engineering studies. It usually comes from, like in Etna, they said, hey, we need to do this work in our downtown area. So it's selected and then the design is made. So, if everyone was driving 15 miles an hour, I would suspect that no one would support slowing the traffic. But I think that because people say, yes, it makes sense to slow the traffic there, then that's just one reason why the project would be warranted. So I can't tell you that this was done because of engineering analysis. This was done because this was a project location that was selected for this technique.
Okay. The Crafton Boulevard, and the last one from Mr. Crown was Crafton Boulevard and Clearview extension turn.
So that issue, I think, was I talked about how we pulled the curb out to make the Clearview Avenue 90 degrees and make all the traffic coming in and out of there a safer maneuver. And I think you were saying that it makes it harder for you to make that turn. I don't think you said you can't make the turn.
We haven't tried because we haven't marked the street to attempt that. What you forget though is at the other end, we cannot get to the Clearview, Bar, Green, Stair, Middle, Mueller, any of those streets off the other end of Clearview. We can't make those turns. So what you're doing is you're hindering us. We can't make the turn there. Now you're hindering the ability at the 90-degree angle to then make another, like 90, to go up the extension, to then make another. So you're hindering the ability for us to get up there, and couple that with the other end of the Clearview, not being able to get out to there. So then would that force us, my concern is now we're headed down Baldwick Road, up Nobleston Road, up the back end of Poplar to try to catch those areas. And you're adding 3-4 minutes to a home run on those areas. Again, fire doubles in size every 30 to 60 seconds. And that's a lot.
far as your fire truck coming up Crafton Boulevard and making the right turn onto Clearview, you're not making a 90. You're still sweeping through there. That entrance is still pretty wide, almost as wide as it is now. It's not.
Yeah, he said it's 90 degrees.
Well, yeah, the road itself, and if you look at,
So when you're 90, you're making it 90, and then you're having to turn. Again, what you're doing is you're flexing those trucks.
I know, but if you look at the exhibit, I mean, you're just kind of just making a small S turn there. You're making much harder turns in the neighborhood than what you do here.
I'm not denying that. I'm saying, but you're putting more emphasis into making this not. To do that, why not leave that open, pull the street back on a 45 a little bit, and still let you make that sweep and get up there? Because with cars on that extension, and I can tell you at times there's 3 or 4 cars backed up. What do you've got to then wait for all those cars to clear that extension before we can get up there.
Yeah. I just don't see it. I'm looking at the model and I don't see it.
Yeah, I'm talking reality, you're talking.
Yeah, but you're predicting in this case, because you haven't tried it, right?
It's not marked on the curb.
Okay. Why don't we do that? Then we won't have to predict. Yeah. Why don't we try that? Why don't we paint the curb and have those guys take a run?
And then we're coming back here saying, hey, this is gonna work. Yeah.
Yeah, but once again, if we do change that, then it does mitigate the intent of protecting vehicle traffic. So.
Okay.
And the engineers have to go through PennDOT and quite a bit of back and forth with PennDOT to get a qualified plan. And a lot of this is now dictated by PennDOT because it is a PennDOT intersection. Is that correct?
Alberto, I don't think this one is. Pardon me?
Yeah, this is the portion.
Oh, this is a portion of the state. Okay. Oh, that's right. This is further up. So.
Now, just from a design standpoint.
It did require HOP.
Yeah, so we did have to go through iterations with PennDOT. From a design standpoint, if I could speak to that, if this were a blank slate today, we would not design what's out there now.
Yeah. Okay. So the next question is, so this went to Ms. O'Brien, how she can get out of her driveway at 1828 Crafton and access during construction.
So the issue of construction is just simply allowing us to know what problems you're having and we'll correct them. So the contractor is required to give you access, or at least to notify you if they're going to be temporary blockages of access. So if your driveway or something would be blocked, they would say, hey,
They haven't told us anything. At one point, they even had one of the things all the way out in a piece of metal just in front of our driveway. They also have taken part of our land and to fill their, whatever they're doing. That was the egress. Right. So they took the egress, but like, there wasn't. Yeah.
well, it's temporary and that property is on the right of way. So they do have. Right, it is temporary compared to a lifetime. So I guess what I'm saying is, I'm not saying they're doing that. I'm saying they're required to do it. So you let us know and we will require them to do what they are required to do, which is to notify you and make sure you have access.
The issues they haven't, and I'm not home most of the time. And if she can't get out, she's, mom, like, that's just not safe. Like, and it wasn't like we weren't notified. All of a sudden at 7:30 in the morning, they just started digging into the ground with no warning.
We will talk to the contractor tomorrow about that.
So you should call the borough office whenever that happens so that
Right.
we can address it
And
directly.
they've been working at 7:30 every morning and then it just stops for like hours.
Yeah.
The other question was coming into the driveway. Can you give me 6 more inches from making a right turn back into the driveway? So what I've been trying to do to stay out of construction minutia is I pull into my driveway and I go out through my garage into the alley. And then I don't come back out to Crafton Boulevard. I go the other way and around the bouts, knowing the back of Crafton. I lived here all my life, so I can get around. It's just the pulling into the driveway, how close that bump out is where my driveway used to be.
Yeah, I understand. So when you're coming down Crafton Boulevard, making a right into your driveway, you're worried that the bump out's gonna push you far out and you're gonna miss your turn into your driveway.
No, I won't miss the turn. I'm going a little bit more into the left lane to make that right turn to make sure I'm missing the bump.
Okay.
Okay, so the question is, that bump out. Like brought more in, so we can make that little bit more spacing.
Okay, that's something else. We'll add that to the list of items that we're looking at that have been identified tonight. And do you think it might be more difficult now because it's under construction? Like there's cones and there's area.
We've been watching and like we went and looked at it and tried it's just a bump out. It's not the cones anymore. They pulled the cones all back in. It's the actual bump out that is starting to have the curve there.
Right, so you're making that turn and you're saying that's what you can't make.
We can make it. It's just making it unsafe because we have to go all the way.
You swing out into the other lane. Okay.
I shouldn't have to.
Okay.
So we can address that, and then anything related to the contractors, you know, with laying stuff or blocking your driveway, you need to call the borough building right away. Now, if it's happening after hours or something, well, they shouldn't be there after, yeah, it shouldn't be, yeah. Okay.
And just to add to that, they're allowed to start at 7 in the morning. And
We didn't have any warning, so that was the issue. It's again, just the morning after.
well, it's just a courtesy and they are required. The idea too, the metal that you talked about, that's the plate so that you can drive over to cover the.
I understand what the plate is.
Okay.
There was a piece of strap that was in front of, like, in our
Driveway.
Like,
blocking the driveway.
and they're up and down our driveway talking, yelling on their cell phones. Like, I went up over her.
Okay, so we can address that.
Okay, yes. All right, so we have quite a few questions still here, so we'll go through them as quickly as we can. I think Mr. Fletcher had mentioned about the tail swing on Vance Alley, which I think was Mr. Crown's question too.
Does that drawing show that, Alberto? I think it does.
It shows how when you make the 9, you can see the overhang.
Yeah, that's what the green line represents, is the body of the truck.
Both existing and proposed, you still go on to the parallel park spaces. So we're not changing that. We're use the exact same template to put on the existing and the proposed concept.
Okay, the next one was regarding parallel parking. Are we going to show this?
Yeah, so you can see in the right picture, there is showing some tail swing into like the parking spots there for the, yeah, it's present in both images. So it looks like if there were cars parked along Crafton Boulevard here, you would tail swing into the cars when making that turn.
The next one was regarding parallel parking and the school buses. The question that Ms. Smith had asked about.
Yeah, so we'll have to look at the buses. I didn't think that they were turning right up that direction. So they do. What's the route for that when they go up Baldwick and make a right?
That is city buses, that is Carlington buses. When I come from dropping Bishop Canavan kids off, and then I gotta come back to pick up elementary school kids. I sometimes, depending on traffic, what time of day, whatnot, I'll come down Baldwick and I have to make that right onto Crafton Boulevard. And then I pick up at Harris Street steps and then at Lawson and Josephine, turn the bus around and come back down. But I'm not the only bus that does that. We have several parochial schools that Carlington does. So we are doing a high school run, then we're out at another school, and then we've got to come back down.
Okay.
And that's one route to come down because, you know, you can't always get there from here.
So we'll present a drawing, a model on that as well.
Okay. The turning radiuses are very tight. We talked about that. Actively promoting and publicly available information. This was Mr. Smith had talked about that. And I think, Doug, you can speak to how we've promoted this project publicly. Through the newsletter, through all of the communication.
Yes, I mean, we've had, it's been on council comments. It was in the fall of 2021, Crafton Courier, where it was outlined. There's been numerous conversations that Rick went through in the beginning, so.
Planning Commission.
Groundbreaking, planning commission, yes.
The care for the greenery. So the greenery that's going to be in place, the
The
trees.
street trees are all maintained by the borough. So these will be borough trees.
So all of the greenery will be maintained by Public Works. Okay. And the Bradford intersection, so this is right in front, the portion that juts out right, I guess, at the stop sign right across the street from it. We're making that smaller, so that even increases a harder turn for most people and making an intersection that is already very dangerous smaller. Was Mr.
Where's that?
That was Mr. Smith.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was Mr. Smith. Mhm.
Out there, he's been taking some pictures of things going on. One second.
Like they didn't survive. Yeah, those didn't survive.
Well, even if, I'm sorry, I apologize, but even if I show the, yeah, if we can see the, I mean, even looking down here, like, as we mentioned, this is a, tractor trailer coming through, and this is the area that I think you're talking about, right? Coming up Bradford and making a left turn.
No, I'm talking about coming on Crafton Boulevard, saying you're going from the school towards like Clearview and stuff. When you stop there, like the cars stop, they used to stop like right here, right on that sidewalk. They used to stop right there and drive. They used to be closer to this side of the road here and come along, and you're making that intersection smaller for those cars. You're making it, and it's not impossible to maneuver in, but what I'm saying is it is in fact making that intersection smaller, and it's making it harder to maneuver in.
So saying you stop here. They're saying they ride the right side here.
Yeah, but as far as like sight distance, you you have a straight shot looking up the hill. You're like, you're not.
But I mean, you don't have to worry too much about looking forward, because they have a stop sign, you have a stop sign. What you really have to worry about is looking down to your, down Bradford to your left. And
If
and
you
because
have
it
to go all
curves.
the way out now, the people that are coming to make the left or right on Bradford, now you're in their way. Because before you used to pull over in front of the stop sign in front of Bradford Porch driveway, but now you're not gonna have that.
It was probably to intentionally slow the traffic
Right.
on Bradford approaching that intersection so they don't rip through there and sideswipe your car.
And to minimize the illegal parking at the main intersection there, so. Green space area through there to minimize or eliminate any parking in that area.
No one's denying it's slowing down traffic. I'm gonna initiate that, I say that again. No one's denying it's slowing down traffic. The point of it is making it more irritating to drive. It's making it more frustrating to drive.
Okay.
And the question is all that worth it?
Okay. So, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, you can't. So, yeah, we've had the chance to get all the questions, so we've gone through them, and the responses may or may not be responses that you wanted to hear from the engineers. What will happen is when we go through the infrastructure committee, council will be able to discuss everything we've heard. And if there's decisions that have to be made or anything, any type of discussion, council will be able to do that. So I do want to recognize all the residents and the comments, because this is what we want. We want to hear from you, and we want this information if you have problems. And that's why we're here. We're here to serve you. So thank you so much for very thought out comments. There were, now, if anybody online has any other comments they would like to make about agenda items, they can do so now by raising their hand. There was nobody that had signed in on anything else. Okay, we have none. Okay. We're going to acknowledge the receipt of the written report. So on the OneDrive for May of 2022, this was the financial statement, treasurer's police, EMS, code enforcement, and building inspection reports were all uploaded. And did any council members have any questions or comments? All right, the president's report. So the only thing I have is that we've done an RFP for the strategy session. And again, this is something as we look for the future, and this will be definitely a meeting that the public would attend where we would have a strategy session talking about our future. What do we want to do from a Crafton standpoint? So we will have a facilitator that will help us with that. And we have an RFP out, which is due on July 14th, where if somebody wants to volunteer, not volunteer, they want to come forward and be a facilitator for this session, they can do so. The mayor's report. We can't hear you. We can.
The one thing that I would just crystallize is after listening to our fire chief, I just want to underscore his ask that we consider the 3 items, making a change at the Bradford Court, a change at Vance Alley and Clearview, and I would just ask that council approve for Gateway to look into those items and come back to us. Thank you.
Solicitor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. I have a quick report tonight. So there's been some changes to the regulations under the Pennsylvania Uniform Construction Code, which will necessitate the borough to consider some housekeeping changes to our UCC ordinance. Very minor. We're actually splitting the cost between a lot of our municipalities. There was some initial costs, so you're getting like 1/7, I think, of the cost of the time. So I'll be putting together a quick ordinance to take care of those, unless anybody has an objection, and I'll get it over to Doug, hopefully by the end of next week, and he can disseminate it to you all. You can look at it at your next meeting and decide if you want to move it to advertisement, etc. But again, real minor housekeeping things. If you read it, you'll probably want to fall asleep. So that's the end of my report.
Thank you. Manager's report.
You have a written report in the OneDrive, but I did want to make note of one item that we've been talking about, the gas company in the Steuben Street reconstruction there. There are 2 repairs that are on Churchill and Steuben. Those are actually water company repairs. So we are working with them on those 2, as well as finishing up some of the old water repairs from a break that happened in the springtime and some other miscellaneous items. So that's all I have.
May I make a comment, please?
Sure.
Manager, I wanted to say thank you to the Public Works Department for the work they did up on Bar. They cleaned up a slope that had failed on a property that was blighted and had been abandoned and torn down. And they did a nice job, and they worked with engineers. So really appreciate that was cleaned up, and the neighborhood says thank you.
Great. Thanks. All right. Next are the standing committee reports, finance and administration. Ms. Perry?
Nothing new tonight.
All right. Community services and infrastructure. Ms. Compitello is not here tonight, so Mr. Lavasser is going to do the report.
Mr. President, would you like to proceed with the discussion concerning?
Yes.
All right. So we're going to open the discussion among council members concerning the Crafton Boulevard update. Feel free to start the conversation, comments, questions, concerns, ideas, and this is what we're here to discuss.
Right. This is the process of, you've heard everything from residents, you've heard everything from the engineers. Council can ask questions or do whatever you like or not. I do have one to start off. As I go through the different construction zones, and I'm on the Shade Tree Commission, so I'm very familiar with trees. And I'm looking at the trees that are outlined here, and my concern is that even when they're planted as small trees and they get bigger, how are you going to see when you're making these turns, when these trees get big or there's shrubs there, and especially on Baldwick, as you're making a turn, you are lower than the level of those trees. So has there been consideration around that streetscaping for people making turns and other?
Yeah, so that's definitely a concern, as you know, any tree that's planted as part of the streetscape is going to be much power for tree to plant.
Right.
So it's going to be in the ballpark of 10 feet tall. We would expect a contract 6-foot clearance. It's not going to extend beyond the road. That's when but we have 6-foot vertical. Car stopped there sitting, you would have good sight distance as it's planted initially under the tree. Right. As that canopy grows, obviously years down the road, 5 years from now, you know, that tree around the door stuff, streetscape, you know, those will need to be maintained. You know, to get clearance to 6 feet in case a semi truck comes up.
What about different size? Because you've got sedans, you've got SUVs that are all various sizes.
Right. So that, I mean, that would, on a maintenance schedule, that would need to obviously happen incrementally. So maybe the point is, okay, we're going to make these. I mean, that's once a limb starts protruding in the road, start moving from car. So they're installed. Does that make sense?
Kind of, because I guess my question is, when you're turning, when you're making things and you need visibility, which we've all been talking about tonight, and you have a tree there, you know, you're at a different height than the tree, your car, whatever you're driving, and you could be in the middle of the bush side of the tree versus the trunk versus the body.
Those trees are also, yeah, they're good point out where it's mentioned here. None of those trees are located within the clear sight distance for what you take a turn. So that's something to consider also. Trunk of that tree and the growth of that, where you would stop, safe stop zones beyond acting.
Any other discussion by council? Yeah, Mr. Marks.
Yeah, I just want to point out, yeah, I appreciate everybody in the community coming out, signing into Zoom. You know, as a parent of 2 who's going to have a kindergartner, not this next school year, the school year after, right? I'm just as concerned as everybody else when, especially the elementary school particularly, is called out as a, you know, a point of worry. So, yeah, I know there's a level of trust that comes with, you know, the weight that the title of fire chief carries, somebody who's been in our community for a really long time. So I don't doubt that that their concerns about the safety were legitimate, but I wasn't convinced, especially around the elementary school, that a lot of these risks were introduced by this project specifically. And I think this chronology report is great from Gateway. I know that I dug through the OneDrive to look for other references of the streetscape. There are pictures and plans and things that went to Planning Commission, came to council, like July of last year, and a couple of other times before then, that do clearly show the bump outs, both for the Bradford apartments and for Vance, you know, the Vance Alley and a couple of other places. So I guess all that to say, I guess I would have hoped that, particularly because there's, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people who were on the last council in this room right now, that some of these concerns might have come earlier in the process before we started putting shovels in the ground and pouring concrete. And I know that seeing it kind of laid out is a different situation than looking at plans on paper. But yeah, I guess that's just kind of, those were my surprises. But nonetheless, I can put myself in everybody's shoes here. If I were somebody not as involved in the borough business as I am now, I would be just as concerned as all of you. So I appreciate everybody coming out and talking through their points.
Mr. President, can I make a motion? This is Colton. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, Colin.
Okay, can I make a motion at this time?
Yes, yes.
I would like to make a motion for the engineer to take all of the notes from the fire chief and either change or remove the bump outs only at Bradford Court and Vance Alley.
You can't make a
behind the
motion.
school.
It's not on the agenda.
He-
Oh, you can do
Yeah,
that. Okay.
Make a motion.
Okay, so I'll start over. I would like to make a motion for the engineer to take the notes from the fire chief and change or remove the bump outs only at Bradford Court and Vance Alley behind the school to address the safety concerns that the fire department has presented.
Can you repeat that, Mr. Chandler?
Yes,
Okay,
I'd like to
thank
make a motion for the engineer to take the notes from the fire chief and change or remove the bump outs only at Bradford Court and Vance Alley behind the school to address the safety concerns of the fire department.
Does anybody need that repeated? Okay. That'd be good. Okay, so motion's on the table. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right. Second, Mr. Rodella. Discussion. Does anybody have any discussion? Great. One
Can I
thing
ask for a clarification?
Yeah.
This motion is actually saying to remove as opposed to come back and reporting on the implications.
I think the motion is to take the notes and change or remove the Bradford Court and Vance Alley bump outs.
So in other words, if it needs to be worded differently, change as in Mr. Crown had mentioned, angling it. I'm not an engineer, so I don't know. That's why I said change or remove the bump outs so that they can better work for the fire department. And if there's a better way to word that, I would be absolutely open to somebody amending this motion.
I would amend and remove the word remove. And I would replace with modify.
So right now we have the engineer take the notes from the fire chief and change or remove Bradford Court and Vance Alley bump outs to address the safety concerns. That was the motion that's on the table and been second. So now Mr. Lavasser's saying to take out remove from that
They
motion.
change, replace change and remove with modify.
Okay, we can't do that right now. We would have to, the motion would have to fail.
Actually, if the motioner.
Oh, the motion, Mr. Chandler.
Mr. Chandler and the seconder, Mr. Dilla, if you would agree.
Mr. Corbo, I can't hear you if this has something to do with me. I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't turn off my mic. I sit here most of the time without it on. So, no, so what I'm saying is that if the motioner, which is you, Mr. Chandler, and the seconder, Mr. Rodilla, agree to the amendment offered by Mr. Lavasser, that would be the motion on the floor. Otherwise, Mr. Oliverio is correct that it would have to fail and then someone could make a different motion. So
The only reason I'm against changing it to take out the word remove is because this is clearly a concern of the fire department, and I would like to, whether it is removing it or changing it, I would like to not remove it, but if we can't change it in a way that will satisfy the needs of the fire trucks, then I don't see the issue with removing just those two. I think the purpose that they're trying to serve of the rest of them will still be served if we don't take out any of the rest of them except those two. That's why I said only those two areas. That's the only reason I'm against taking out the word remove. I would prefer we change. That's why I put that word first. If you
Mr.
want to
Mark?
take the word change and change it to modify, that's fine with me. Modify or remove.
Mr. Mark?
Ms. Perry, as mayor, how worried are you about these bump outs for public safety reasons? Like, do you think we need to do this?
I think that we have beat this to death and that our fire chief is sincere about what he's saying. And I think that what he came to the table with tonight was modify. And Mr. Crown, please correct me if I'm wrong, that what I heard clearly was he asked for modifications. And I don't think that we should have a motion that says remove when the request is for modifying.
And I guess part of this is who makes then that decision? Is it coming back to council?
Exactly.
Again, because there's two options. So if we approve this, then who makes that decision? So then we stand still with that type of motion right now. So I think, you know, of course, the motion is on the table. It can be changed. Oh, go ahead.
Again, I'm not a policymaker. I'm just offering a suggestion that, you know, rather than having a motion directing a change or a modification, would be to direct the engineer to review those items, make a proposal to council, and then you'll know exactly what you're voting on, because Mr. Crown will know, the engineer will redesign it if necessary, et cetera. And then in front of council, there would be an actual plan. I'm sure Gateway could put a dollar figure on what that might cost, and then you all can make a decision. That's just my view from the gallery, if you will.
Mr. Moore?
In that case, can I change my motion, or do we have to let this fail and then I start over?
Yeah, I think Mr. Corbel said you can change your motion as long as Mr. Radilla agrees with you changing your motion.
That's correct.
Okay, then in that case, and I apologize, I'm going to ask for the wording that you just used. I would like to make a motion for the engineer to, this is where I need the wording from you, Mr. Corbel, I'm sorry.
I would just say review the concerns raised by Mr. Crown, the fire chief, with respect to Bradford Court and Vance Alley, and report back to council by the next council meeting, in advance of the next council meeting. Does that seem feasible? Recommendations, costs, etc. Is that feasible that you guys can do that in 2 weeks? Or by the 14th, so that might be a little bit longer. Okay. How about that, Mr. Chandler?
That sounds great to me.
Okay.
One of the things, and you agree. One of the things to consider is we have construction going on right now. So are we also adding into here that we need to stop construction on these areas?
I was curious about that myself. If that's necessary to add that in there, I would add that in there.
Everything's already been installed. I mean, all those curbs are already in.
Okay.
In the sidewalk, I mean, in front of Bradford Court.
What is the time frame on the phase 2 improvements?
In talking with the contractor right now, they finished the curbing on both sides. Right now, they're digging for the light pole bases to put the lights along the streetscape side. Then they're gonna do the sidewalks. They're gonna go over to the parking lot, build the parking lot while the kids aren't there this summer, get that completed, then they're gonna come back and do phase 2. So once they finish the streetscape now, phase 1, they're gonna go to the parking lot and then.
So then, if I understand that correctly, we haven't started the construction on the Clearview extension.
Yeah, but this motion doesn't even
Yeah, it's
reference
only
that.
for Bradford
Right.
and Valley Way.
Right.
Okay.
Vance, sorry. Wait, so do you have the motion written down? Does somebody have it? No. Okay. All right. Mr. Chandler, I kind of wrote it down. So I have the engineer to review the concerns from the fire chief on Bradford Court and Vance Alley and bring recommendations for the next council meeting.
Yes.
Okay. So that's a motion. Do we have a second? Are you good with that? Okay. So we have a second. Any more discussion? Right.
So at this point, what we're proposing would not hold up any current construction on the streetscape. Yeah, because we don't need the roads tore up any longer than they need to be.
Correct. The two areas that have been identified have already been constructed. There'll be no holdup.
Any other questions or discussions? I'd like to call a roll call vote for this one. So, Mr. Sample, we're going to do it in a rotating fashion so that it's not always Aaron that's on the top. So Mr. Sample has that.
Yeah, so the order will go, Mr. Chandler,
Yes.
Mr. Lavasser,
Yes.
Mr. Marks,
Sure.
Mr. Oliverio,
Yes.
Mr. Radilla,
Yes.
and Ms. Bollenbacher.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes.
Thank you. Mr. Lavasser, continue on.
I'd like to request that for some of the minor changes that the resident came out with their driveway, which seems like they're minor field adjustments with a few inches either way, that the engineer review that with the inspector and make those modifications because they appear to be de minimis and not tangible to the overall design.
Alberta, or those curbs are constructed already as well, right? So that would require reconstruction.
Okay, then just we'll have to evaluate further.
I think
That can be part of the Vance that you've already, that is Vance, so we can just include that as the evaluation.
Okay, thank you.
You're still will.
I'm still up.
Yes.
All right, are we through with the Crafton Boulevard update and discussion for council? All right, great. Fire inspection ordinance. This ordinance requires each commercial multifamily 3 or more units, assembly, churches, industrial and institutional, including group homes, to pay for an annual inspection to identify and mitigate potential fire hazards. So I move to approve ordinance 1673, amending chapter 90, article 3, and chapter 149 of the Crafton Borough Code of Ordinances, revising regulations pertaining to the annual fire inspections.
Seconded.
Mr. Chandler, second. Discussion? I'd like to say that this has been on our agenda for probably the past 4 meetings, and has been advertised and to the public. And we also had public comments from Mr. Smith regarding this item too. So just want to make sure that everybody's aware of that. Any other discussion?
So currently, do these inspections occur?
No, they have not.
But they're required on a every 2 years.
They're actually be required on an annual basis now. This is amending an ordinance that was adopted in 2018, 2019. And at this point, it was not implemented back then. We needed to make some tweaks. So this will be implemented this year.
So, may I, since we have our fire chief here who was a proponent of this, could we ask him to just put a little background into the reason that we have this and we have this discussion? Mike, would you
If
mind?
he's willing. Mr. Radilla had a comment too before that.
Oh, sorry. I was wondering who, so we have to do it annually or?
Yeah, it would be required under this.
Under this ordinance, yes, it would be an annual.
Right.
Okay. So I know that there were concerns that that was a little burdensome annually. So I'd like to, are there enough annually versus biannually? Is there a huge difference? Because I don't want to make it too burdensome on people who'd be affected by this.
Right.
So I'd love to hear, you want to say anything?
Would you like, you have to come up, Mike. Because people can't hear you. And this will be under not like 10 minutes or anything.
No, this is
Okay.
easy. So this ordinance was actually in the works since 2010. So
Turn on the
eventually,
mic, turn on the mic.
it's on.
Okay.
So the ordinance was actually in the works since 2010. Municipality did not have any ordinances to look at the fire ordinances. And what this does is give a fire inspection for all of our commercial properties now is allowable. And I think it was 2018, it was passed to start in 2019. We never hit the 2019 and it just keeps getting pushed back. To your question about a 1 year versus 2 years, for the commercial structures, the churches, the industrial, and those types of institutional, I think every 1 year is good because of the fire load and the loss of property and life in those types of structures. I could, almost agree to the multifamily residential because they do go through renters and occupancy inspections to maybe be pushed back if so council wishes to a 2 year inspection. But what this also does is we've had issues with commercial properties with, stores being the curb, the alleyways not being, wide enough. Some of the schools or the high rises having certain conditions that exist that we had no opportunity to enforce. So we've called the county fire marshal to come in and do an inspection, but then that leads way into what is their jurisdiction versus our jurisdiction. So this now gives Crafton the ability to have that. Plus, the nice thing is when we have these inspections, communities have an ISO rating insurance service organization. In that rating, they first ask, when do you do your inspections and how do you do them? How do you do your pre-planning? That also affects commercial and residential insurance premiums. So when the fire department now has we're a class 3 fire department, one of maybe only 20 in the county, this will also help our fire rating because now we're doing those inspections and taking out some of those property issues and, out of the equation. So hopefully that helped. Okay.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay.
Yeah, Mr. Marks.
So we have an ordinance today, but we're not inspecting properties. That's correct? And will this will unblock our inspector to start going and doing them now? So I'd say I'd probably be open to the same flexibility for the multifamily homes, but we're still in our first year here. And I'd honestly just like to see us get this through so we can start the work and get that first inspection. Because honestly, passing this tonight doesn't change anything, whether it's 1 or 2 years. The inspections start now. And maybe next year, if we hear back from multi-unit owners that this is burdensome or too much or too costly or whatever, then maybe we consider re-amending it to adjust. But I think the priority should be just getting this passed tonight.
Do we know how many properties this would affect?
We had that at a previous meeting, 1,200, I believe. We've got 1,100 rental units.
That's
but
the
it's-
number of units. That's not the number of
But it's only the
buildings.
common areas.
It's
Yeah.
only the common areas for multi-residents of 3 units or more. So the 1,200 number is the actual number of individual apartments and not the number of buildings. I know that our looking at it from the tax side, there had been a number of 300 rental buildings, landlord. So it's probably more in that 200 to 300 range.
And do we think the inspector has the bandwidth for this?
The inspector was the one that recommended the annual change. He asked that it be changed from the biannual to the annual for it would make his job easier is what it would make the enforcement of it more streamlined.
Okay, thank you.
Any more discussion? All right. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Oops. Opposed? Okay. Motion passes.
Mr. President, do you mind if I skip item 3 due to the time?
Yep.
Is that right?
Yeah, as long as does anybody else? Is everybody okay?
We just,
Yeah, that's fine.
if that's all right. All right. Ms. Perry, you can add in here since you were at the kickoff meeting with Ms. Compatello. Ms. Compatello's out of town this evening. The contract with Ingram Borough has been signed. A kickoff meeting was held yesterday at around 11 o'clock. The consultants being Zone Code, WSP, and Patrick Associates, and Patrick Associates has done work here before, the comprehensive plan for one. They had a good meeting. They also had a walkthrough of the communities. So both Ingram and Crafton are going to be doing their cost share agreement. The work that is applicable to the Borough of Crafton only will be billed to us, but most of the items will be equally billed. Invoices for the project will be provided to both municipalities as the work is respective to them. So with that being said, it sounds as if the manager in Crafton has the lead here, and Ms. Compatello will be leading the effort, and she is underway organizing the steering committee. And we have a number of business and community members that will also be a part of the effort. So we look forward to this project that's been in the wings for a long while now. Now that the majority of the pandemic has subsided, this is a good time for us to reevaluate our zoning Crafton, and I wish the project well. And I know there are a lot of people that have been anticipating this for a long time. So again, thank you.
Great. All right, communications, recreation, community events, Mr. Marks.
No event updates for today beyond what's already covered in the announcements coming up. I did want to note that we're still coming up, we're still talking through the Rotary project for the sign at Crafton Park. We're considering, some adjustments to making a higher resolution sign that looks a little bit nicer, right? It is one of the primary roads through Crafton, so we do want to make it look nice. One of the options we're considering is a panel that was just hung on the front of the Kerwin Heights Fire Department. So going to be going down there and checking that out. If anybody's interested in what that might look like, go check the fire department out at Kerwin Heights. Yeah, and as we kind of move through some of the work there, I'll have more to present to the community and to council to comment. That's it.
Thank you. All right, commission vacancy, Mr. Chandler.
It's okay. He asked me to take care of it.
Oh,
He's having
okay.
some issues with his computer.
Absolutely.
Just wanted a reminder, there's still 4 openings left, still 4 vacancies. So we're going to encourage everyone in the community to please go to our website so you can apply. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you know which ones those are?
Yes, we have a library opening. We have an alternate for the zoning committee. We have the civil service and the COG, which is Council of Government.
It's not the COG, it's the UCCG representative for the COG.
Sorry, yeah.
Board.
My apologies.
Okay, yeah. And speaking of COG, we have a COG person.
All right, so last week they had their annual luau celebration. It was really exciting. So the next COG is not until September 13th, and it'll be in Collier. But at the luau, we did win some, there were some awards awarded. We did get an award for 2021 perfect attendance. So, so thank you whoever won 2021. It's really appreciated. They also awarded the President's Award. For 2020, the President's Award went to all local municipal employees. During the COVID, they really stepped up during COVID to make sure that the communities were still running. And then 2021, they awarded it to all elected officials for our dedication, sacrifices, and leadership. So congratulations.
Great. So the next meeting is September?
Yes, I guess they're off for the summer, which I'm not mad about.
Oh, that's normal. Oh, okay. Okay.
They've been looking for that perfect attendance since before I got on council. So it actually is a bigger achievement than you think.
Nice.
Half of them were online.
Great. All right, well, glad you enjoyed the luau and can't wait for the pictures. All right. No pictures. The next meeting is not 2 weeks, right? It is 3 weeks, July 14th at 7:15, which is again, still the second Thursday of the month. Crafton Borough will be celebrating Independence Day at Crafton Park on the July 4th, starting at 7 p.m. Food trucks, live music, and fireworks will be part of the festivities. The Thomas J. Witt Memorial 5K Run Walk begins at 8 a.m. that day. The Crafton Mini Golf is open on Fridays and Saturdays all summer from 7 to 9. Cost is $2 per person. Seasonal pool pass memberships are still on sale. You can go to the Crafton Borough website, and the applications and all the information are there. Public comment. At this time, citizens may address the Crafton Borough Council on any issue. Only residents and taxpayers of the borough will be permitted to address council. Speakers will be permitted to speak for a maximum of 3 minutes. Groups are a maximum of 5 minutes. Please sign in and/or raise your hand on Zoom. I guess raise your hand here and state your name and physical address for the record. Yeah, Mr. Engel.
Hi, Robert Engel, 10 Walnut Street. I remembered this time. I'll try to be brief. It's significantly past my bedtime. Usually I'm not available to attend or watch the meetings live, and I have to get the information in other ways. This is not always easily, and typically I'm quite behind on events. The most recent minutes posted to the council meeting agenda and page is from 3 meetings ago. So when the meetings are approved, even today as of 5 o'clock, it's 3 meetings ago that the available information is even available to the public. And earlier, within a month, on May 13th, it was 2 months behind being posted. So if you can't make it to the meeting, it's a significant time, even trying to look back in the meetings minutes, and some of the minutes are as vague as talking about the planning commission and the streetscape. They discussed the streetscape project. So if I wasn't at that meeting, well, just that vague statement doesn't really say much. As for some other things, in talking about PennDOT and in front of the elementary school, from a Google search from the Crafton Borough website, if you search for Doc 007, it's PennDOT's layout of where signage goes. And it shows all of the signs of truck detour all the way up Noble, turning left on Crafton Boulevard in front of the elementary, from the borough's website.
Referring to the Thornburg Bridge detour?
Yes.
Yes, so those are the weekend detours that there's 3 to 4 closures that are potentially scheduled on the weekends in the fall. So that is what Mr. Ingles is referring
and whereas
to.
at least for sometimes PennDOT is saying the truck detour is on Crafton Boulevard in front of the elementary school. I'd like to applaud the fire chief for trying to come up with a working resolution of, it's not my way or the highway. Let's work this. Can we do this? I really would like you to weigh heavily the people who actually do things, that actually bring a truck out and put it on the street, trying to get up the hill into the apartment complex. And you see a picture of it, it can't make it. The design can be all great and wonderful, but if the truck, they try it physically and it can't make it. People who do that and do the work, actually, the people who drive it, I say those supersede the people who design it. Because if he says the truck can't make it, the truck can't make it. But I would also like to commend the council on upgrades to the YouTube things. Being able to watch it is very helpful. I would also, can we continue the upgrades and try to make it a higher resolution to the website or to YouTube? Because trying to see anything on the displays, you can't see anything, even on a big TV. And my last comment.
What can't you see?
So if there's anything being displayed in the meeting of here, reference this document, oh, here,
Oh,
look at this picture.
Yeah.
Well, from that camera there, it's only a matter of like 10 pixels wide of seeing those screens. Because there's times when those aren't what's on it,
Okay.
you know.
Yeah, because it should be showing actually better watching the video versus even in here.
There have been times.
We'll just have to take a note that when we're sharing things on the screen, we should also be sharing them over Zoom, because if they aren't shared on Zoom, the YouTube videos will not actually show the document or the map or whatever it is.
Okay.
So if we're not using screen share on Zoom, they don't get picked up in the YouTube
Then nobody-
recordings. Correct.
Okay.
And I promise my last comment before is in talking about public documents, there's a lot of reference to this is on OneDrive. And as a resident, is there public access to OneDrive so we can see those? Or on every single mention of that, do I have to put in a right to know request and wait? Because I put in right to know request specifically talking about the months behind. And I emailed and I faxed and I even stopped by the office and it was just a process that, yes, they did it within a time frame, but I had to do, it was 4 times that I had to try the request to actually get it done. So it's an awful lot of documents.
When was that?
May 13th.
Okay.
Is when I emailed, I faxed, I stopped by, and I did receive a phone call back and got the documents,
Oh,
but
okay.
it was certainly a chore. So thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Engel. Do we have anyone else? Okay. All right. With that, the meeting is adjourned. It is 9:50. Oh my God, 9:50. Thank you, everyone.